Tamiko Lowry Pugh, often referred to as the Empowering Diva, is a voice for women's empowerment. She's the CEO of Living the Empowered Life LLC, where she teaches women how to create transformational businesses that make money and make a difference. Tamiko is also the host of Living the Empowered Life podcast and the founder of the Still Standing Alliance, a nonprofit organization that focuses on domestic violence advocacy, awareness, and prevention. As a survivor of domestic violence, Tamiko is very transparent about her healing journey. This has allowed her to construct a powerful movement dedicated to the empowerment and personal development of women across the world. She is a compassionate mentor, a friend, an enthusiastic leader, and visionary. Tamiko is a member of the E-Woman Network Atlanta chapter and the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, Inc. MECA chapter, where she served as the first vice president of the program. She is an active member of Women in Spotlight Going Global, Professional Women in Advocacy, the Classy Living Society, and several other professional organizations. Over the years, she has received many awards and recognitions, including the Rising and Community Excellence Award, Female Visionary of the Year Award, and most recently, Tamiko received the Legend of Champions Award, as well as Unsung Hero Award for her dedication to the fight to end violence against women, just to name a few. Tamiko earned her business degree from Colorado Technical University. She is a certified domestic violence advocate, and after attending the International Coaching of Science Research Institute, she obtained certifications as a certified life coach and public speaker and master communicator. Tamiko is also a trained certified master life coach trainer. Tamiko believes that empowerment comes from within and can be achieved by honoring yourself, your values, and expressing your talents and gifts. Let's welcome her. And welcome back, Grief Nation listeners. Today on our podcast, we have Tamiko Lowry Pugh, and this is in the series Oath. Hi, Tamiko, how are you?
I am good. How are you today?
I'm blessed and glad that you are here to share your story today. How's everything going?
Everything is going good, in spite of, some of the things and some of the adversities that we experienced as a country in the past year. I will say that, my family and I are blessed and just in a thankful and in a state of gratitude.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So we're going to just jump right into our interview today. And can you tell us a little bit about your journey of becoming the Empowering Diva?
Yes, that's a really good question. I get that a lot. So here's the thing. I've always had a passion for really inspiring people, for empowering people. But so let me kind of back up a little bit.
Yeah.
I was in an very toxic, abusive relationship, right? So, me always wanting to be I was always the go-to person to my friends. I was always that person that encouraged everyone. But being in this abusive relationship, it really stripped me of my self-worth, my self-esteem, my self-confidence, right? And so I thought, it made me feel like I wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough to be in that space of women's empowerment because I felt like, if I'm in this relationship, why would someone want to listen to me? And not only that, because my self-esteem was so broken, I just didn't feel good enough. But as I began to rebuild my life after abuse, I wanted to create a platform where I can empower other women who are actually going through what I was able to survive. And it worked. I launched my nonprofit organization. But what I realized was that it took me to go through that experience to understand my self-worth, and to really be comfortable. And here, let me rephrase that. I think what it did was it pushed me into my purpose. Mm-hmm. It pushed me into my purpose, to be able to empower women. And oftentimes we have no idea what our purpose is or that thing that we really want to do, but it takes a situation like that to really push you into your purpose. So that's actually how it happened. And just really wanting to empower women. And so the Empowering Diva, I just feel like that's who I am. It's a way of life for me. I love to encourage. I love to inspire. I love to empower people in general. So of course, that's where the word empowering comes from. But when we think about the word diva, oftentimes we think of diva as like someone with an attitude, right? Or something like that. But what I did was I took the acronym for DIVA, and it stands for Divinely Inspired, Virtuous, and Anointed.
Mhm.
So divinely inspired, virtuous, and anointed. And I feel like we all should walk, um, the walk of like the Proverbs woman, right? So being that virtuous woman. So that's where it comes from.
Well, that's a beautiful story. And thank you so much for being vulnerable to share those intimate parts of your life of being a survivor and wanting to empower women. Can you please share what are some unforeseen signs for someone being in a domestic, that's being domestically abused?
Yeah, so there are so many signs, so many warning signs that we oftentimes overlook, especially women, because we get into a relationship, you fall in love with a person, right? And I'm gonna just use my personal experience. You think you've met the man of your dreams, your Prince Charming, and for me, um, that dream can turn into my worst nightmare per se, right? So there were things that happened early on that were warning signs
Hmm.
that I didn't pay attention to. So things like extreme jealousy. Sometimes we look at jealousy as like, oh, he just really, he loves me. He doesn't want anyone around me.
Hmm.
But extreme jealousy is one of those unforeseen signs that we don't look at as a warning sign, but it really is.
Yeah.
And the other thing is discouraging you from being around your friends and family. I had an amazing group of friends when he and I met, and he just wanted it to be me and him again. I confused him being jealous and him wanting me to be around him all the time and not my friends and family members as love, right? He would be like, well, you don't need to be around them. They're still single.
Yeah.
You're about to get married. You're in this relationship. And I looked at it as like, you know what? He just cares about me. He just wants the best for me. But it
Yeah.
was a warning sign.
Hmm.
And then um, things like not letting me make my own decisions, Miami. So it would be things like, I'm a very outgoing person. I like colors. Colors brighten up my day. Yellows, hot pinks. Those colors make me feel good. I'm a free spirit. And so things like buying my clothes for me, like putting me in pantsuits, right? Having my hair put back in a little tight bun, just the polished, professional corporate look. It was cool, but it wasn't me.
Yeah.
So he would make those decisions for me, all the way down to the career that I had. Oh, you should get into real estate. I went to real estate school because he wanted me to go to real estate school. I dressed a certain way because that's how he wanted me to dress.
Yeah.
So him making those decisions for me, again, confusing that for love. He wants what's best for me. He wants me to be cute and polished, but it was control.
Hmm.
And so when you think about those small things, all it is power and control. Domestic violence, abuse is power and control at the end of the day. So when a person does something that can control you, jealousy can control you, right? Because you're like, well, if I do this, he's going to get upset. That's control.
Hmm.
Controlling the finances, right? Insulting or demeaning you, that's control. Discouraging you from being around your friends and family, you don't do it because you feel like he's going to be upset. That is a form of power and control, and that's all domestic violence is. And so I really want women to understand, here's the thing, understanding your intuition, right? Your intuition, the Holy Spirit, your gut, whatever it is, like paying attention to that early on. Because we see the signs, we just overlook them.
Yeah. And do exactly as you say. Oh, we consider that as he loves me, or
Mm-hmm.
this is a different type of love that I haven't had, or
Yeah, and those are the things that happen before it gets physical. Because people are always like, well, why did you stay? And if he would have put his hands on me, no, ma'am. It doesn't. On the first date, you're not getting slapped around,
right.
right? You go through that honeymoon stage, and by the time they get done breaking down your spirit,
Yeah.
your self-confidence, and then the physical abuse happens at that point. Sometimes victims think that they deserve it at that point.
Mhm.
All you want to do is get back to that place where he loved you and everything was just wonderful.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Do you have any resources that you can share with that for someone that is in crisis?
Yeah, so a couple of different things when it comes to resources, and it really depends on the stage that you're in, if you're ready to leave, if you're thinking about leaving, if you've already left. So different resources for different people. But the number one thing I will say, if you are in danger, you need to call 911.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in danger, call 911, tell a neighbor, tell a friend, look, I need help.
Yeah.
The other thing is reaching out to your local domestic violence coalitions. Like every state has a domestic violence coalition that's led by the National Coalition of Domestic Violence. But when you think coalition, those are the ones that have the financial resources. They have the the list for the different shelters that you can go to. They can help you to get your protective order. That's the next thing I wanted to talk about, is making sure that you get a protective order, because that's going to protect you as a victim. And then some other resources. Let me do this real quick. I want to give the telephone number for the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is available 24/7. And that's 1-800-799-7233, 1-800-799-7233. And they can connect you with your local domestic violence coalition. They can connect you with different shelters, things of that nature.
Thank you.
There was something else I wanted to add to that. Putting together a domestic violence safety plan. Right. So if you're still in that relationship, even if you've left, having a safety plan is very, very important. My organization, the Still Standing Alliance, we help put together those safety plans. So there's one. If you're in the relationship and you're not sure if you're ready to leave, there are safety precautions that you can take. Right. We help you put together that safety plan. The other one is when you're ready to leave. You can have a safety plan for that. You have to have one for when you're ready to leave. If not, here's the thing. When a victim is ready to leave that relationship, that is the most critical day of their life. And it has to be done the right way. A lot of people say, well, just leave. Or you can't just leave. What if he's crazy? What if he has a gun? What if she's being threatened? What about the kids, right? So people don't understand all that. So putting together a strategic safety plan to help you leave is so important. And you never ever tell the abuser, I'm leaving you today, or I'm getting ready to leave you, because that's when the abuse gets the worst. And again, it's the most critical moment. This is when you see the most homicides or the harshest case of abuse. And I'm gonna just share my story. I remember being in the car with my ex-husband, who was abusive, driving up Interstate 85 here in Atlanta. I was in the driver's seat and I was ready to go. I'm thinking this day, I was like, I'm just gonna tell him I'm leaving. And we were driving and I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving you today. And he said, B, if you leave me, I will kill both of us. And he literally took the steering wheel and tried to force us in an accident. We ended up on the side of the road where he beat me and strangled me until I was unconscious. I remember waking up on the interstate in the middle of 85 with cars swerving around me, blowing their horns, beep, beep, trying to prevent from hitting me. Thank God I survived that day. Like that was the day that I survived. That was the day that my advocacy began. And the reason why I'm saying is because I want people to know how critical it is to actually have a plan and not just say, I'm going to leave, right? And then having a safety plan for after you leave. There's so many things you got to learn. You have to protect yourself, right? Getting that temporary protective order. So your local coalition can help you with that. We help with that at the Still Standing Alliance. You can go to our website, thestillstandingalliance.org. So those are some of the resources that I can think of immediately that could help a victim.
Wow, that was a lot. And I'm so sorry that happened to you, but I'm so grateful that you came out on the other side and that you're helping others through this process. Thank you so much for showing up every day. That I'm sure that was a difficult part of your life, but thank God that you're here. Your advocacy work that you have talked about is a huge part of your journey. Can you share what you've been able to accomplish? And also, I know you have some training programs as well.
Yeah. So, again, our life experiences push us into our purpose. When I was growing up as a little girl, when somebody said, what do you want to be as an adult? I didn't think, oh, I want to grow up to be a domestic violence advocate, right? Like,
Right.
that's just not something that you think about as a child. And so again, it was something, advocacy work is something that I kind of fell into, pushed into my purpose. And some of the things that I've been able to do as an advocate that I'm very grateful for. I'm going to go back to like 2014. I think that was the first time that I had an opportunity to actually create change as far as legislation is concerned. There was a bill, it was called House Bill 911, and it made strangulation a felony in the state of Georgia. Prior to that, it was a misdemeanor. And I remember being asked by the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence, hey, we're working on this piece of legislation that we want to pass. We want to make strangulation a felony. And at that time, I really didn't know a lot about political advocacy. Mm-hmm. So that was my first introduction to it. And I'm like, okay, well, what do I need to do? So they taught me the entire advocacy process. And I remember doing my research on strangulation. And this is the thing that made all those state legislators and the senators vote yes on the bill. I did my research, and what I learned in my research was that so there's a difference, one, between strangulation and choking, because I was like, oh, he choked me, but no, I was being strangled. Mm-hmm. So if you think about a firm handshake, they say it is about a little under about 8 pounds. A firm handshake could be like 8 pounds of pressure. Mm-hmm. It only takes 4 pounds of pressure to strangle someone to death.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And so I remember sharing that and talking about being strangled until I thought I was getting ready to lose my life. And I remember crying. I remember looking up at the state capitol. I'm in the capitol and I'm looking at all these state legislators and these lawmakers, and they're crying. And I just, at that moment, I was like, okay, either they're going to vote yes or no. They're crying, so I think they're going to vote yes, right? But that was my first time being able to create change. Mm-hmm. And I remember the next day, like they voted quickly. Typically, they're in those hearings for a long time. It was quick. I got a phone call the next day. They're like, Tamiko, they passed the law. It's now a felony. So that was like my first, even thinking back on it, I'm like, oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. I don't really talk about that much, but I'm even sharing this. I'm like, man, like that was very interesting. So it's a felony. It's a felony now. So I'm thankful for that. And then 2018, in 2018, we did a campaign for the Crime Victims' Rights Bill to be added to the state constitution in Georgia. So prior to that, crime victims, and it didn't matter if you were a victim of domestic abuse, sexual assault, gunshot, it didn't matter. Crime victims in general did not have constitutional rights. But the accused did, right? When they get read those Miranda rights, you have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. Those are constitution. That's in the Constitution. Mm-hmm. What happens to the victim? You're just standing there. They're getting read their rights, and you're standing there like, okay, well, what rights do I have?
Yeah.
There is a Crime Victims' Bill of Rights, but it wasn't constitutional. Mm-hmm. So they didn't really have to follow that. So we fought for like 2 years. I literally traveled the state of Georgia from Atlanta all the way to Savannah for an entire year, interviewing crime victims of different types of crime, getting their experiences, getting their testimonies. And so when it came time to go to the Capitol and do our hearings, we had all these different crime victims who had experienced, their experience wasn't that great as a victim. It's like they were being re-victimized again, going through that entire court process. But in November of 2008, the state of Georgia voted to add the Crime Victims' Rights Bill to the Constitution. So it was an amendment to the Constitution, Amendment number 4. So I'll never forget that. So those are the two major things that I was able to accomplish as an advocate. And I don't want to just take full responsibility, because it was a group of advocates that did it. And, we all came together. I was just thankful enough to be able to use my voice, because I do realize that everyone is not going to be able to speak up. And so just being able to be the voice for those people who weren't able to speak up. And then the other thing is with our nonprofit, we do have a bunch of trainings. And so we have our teen dating violence awareness training. One of them is specifically for middle school and high school students. Then we have the one for adults who serve youth and for parents. So that training is specifically for like counselors, teachers, youth groups, parents, teaching them the signs of teen dating violence, how to intervene and things of that nature. And then we have a faith-based training for the faith-based community. What we realize is that when a victim is going through something like that, oftentimes the first place they go to is their faith-based community, their church, their mosque, whatever the case may be. Like that's where they go. And a lot of those communities don't know how to handle domestic violence, or they don't talk about it. Right. So we have a training specifically for faith-based leaders to teach them the importance of having maybe a ministry or a support group for victims and survivors, and partnering with organizations that can help them. Mm-hmm. And just really, it's a really in-depth training. And then our other training is for corporations. So right now we work with Bank of America, Merrill Lynch. We've worked with Verizon in the past, where we go in and do a training with their HR staff and some of their leaders, and teaching them how to handle domestic violence when it happens. And then the Domestic Violence 101 training is for anyone. And we do those quarterly. They're free. It's a free training that we do quarterly. And Domestic Violence 101 is just really teaching advocates and people in the community who want to learn more about domestic violence. So that's what our training programs look like.
Well, I was going to ask you about the brand and what is living the empowered life, but that is living the empowered life. And I'm sure there is so much more, but I'm so grateful for you, and for you even to mention about families, or those that have been victimized, and them going to their faith-based to try to handle these issues or concerns that they may have when they're unequipped to even support them in that manner. But thank God that your organization, your nonprofit, have the ability to share with the individuals that are being victimized and that needs the support, because for so many years, like we all know, not talking and sharing our stories has held us back from getting the support that we need. So I'm so grateful for you. Thank you for sharing that. And what are other parts of your brand that we possibly haven't discussed so people can get to know you?
Okay, so we talked about the advocacy portion, which I really run that under the Still Standing Alliance, which is a nonprofit. I just found that it was easier to do it as a nonprofit because it's just easier. It's just easier to do it as a nonprofit because I do have a separate brand, which is Living the Empowered Life, which is my life after abuse. So still standing was my thing. Like, I am still standing, right? And so we're still standing, but the next phase of that for me personally was living the empowered life. And so after you go through something, right, you've been a victim, now you're a survivor, you're still standing. And for me, that next thing was to live that empowered life. And living the empowered life is it really focuses on helping women to be empowered from the inside out. And so there are certain things I believe that you have to do to get to that place. So there are 6 principles to living the empowered life. And it's like one of the little books that I wrote is the 6 steps to living the empowered life. And so once you go through like the domestic violence, assault, whatever it is that you've gone through, it doesn't even have to be domestic violence. Like, we've all overcome some things. But there are 6 principles that I came up with. And one of them is the fear factor, overcoming fear, living a life of purpose. Because at this point, you should know your purpose. Whatever that thing is that you went through, I'm sure that there was some type of purpose. There's a meaning behind it. Understanding your values, setting goals that actually move you forward in life, because we don't want to go backwards to what we were before, right? We want to keep moving forward in life. The other principle is having ultimate self-confidence, which is really it's empowering yourself from the inside out, and then walking in your authentic power. We go through so many things in life that we lose our power. And how do you regain that power to walk in your authentic power? Who am I authentically? I talked about being in that abusive relationship, losing myself. He dressed me. He told me where I had to work, what I had to do, all of those things. So regaining your power back and knowing that it's okay to walk in your authentic power and be the person that God has called you to be. So that's what Living the Empowered Life is really all about. That entire brand encompasses, so it's Living the Empowered Life brand, but then we also have Living the Empowered Life Academy, which is the academy where we do a lot of our trainings, teaching you how to use your expertise, your story to create transformational businesses based off of what it is you've gone through. Because 9 times out of 10, someone else is going through that. They're where you used to be. And you can either coach them through that, you can become a speaker and speak on that topic and help someone. So that's what the academy does. And then Living the Empowered Life podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And Living the Empowered Life life coach training program.
Yes. And I was just going to ask you, who is a good candidate for any of the coaching programs that you have?
Yeah. So any of those programs, if you are, it's definitely geared towards women, but women who have inspirational stories of overcoming life's adversities, whatever that thing was you were able to overcome, you're the perfect candidate. You have some type of experience, some type of expertise, something that you've gone through that you're able to help someone else in that area. The coaching program is really specifically for women who have gone through from victim to survivor, and now you're ready to move into that next phase.
Yeah. Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. And you did share one of your books with us, but you're a very well versed author. Can you share some of the other publications that you have out?
Yes, and you know what? I forgot. I meant to grab a couple of them off my bookshelf, but so my very first book was Wounds to Wisdom, I'm Still Standing. And that was my first book where I shared my story, my personal testimony of everything that because it was just more than domestic violence, like teenage pregnancy. I had my daughter at 17, parents both being addicted to drugs, and just kind of navigating that whole thing, being wounded from a child up until I was in that unfortunate domestic violence relationship. So Wounds to Wisdom really touches on all the wounds that we experience, and then turning those wounds into wisdom and learning from them. So Wounds to Wisdom, that's my first book. And then after that, there's a book series, Wounds to Wisdom, where I take the stories of domestic violence survivors and we compile them in the book. So each one of those books has 12 stories. So it has the one with my story, and then we're on volume 3 right now with the compilation. So every other year we do another compilation. We get 12 stories and compile those in the book. And what I love about that book series is that these are women, some of them may have been out of those domestic violence relationships, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, but they're still trying to find their way. And what that book does for them is it gives them an opportunity to not only share their story and help other people, but now they're authors. So they have this book that they can sell and they can bring money, into their household, and they can leave a legacy. So that's what I love the most about that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, so those are the books. And then one more is the 21 Days of Self-Love, which is like a 21-day self-love challenge.
Wow, you have been busy.
I know, I have been.
Busy.
I'm so grateful, though. I'm like, it's only God that I could really do all of this. Like growing up, I'm like, I would have never thought I would be an author. Like, I'm not good enough to write a book, but you can do anything.
Yeah, you have proven that if we kind of have similar stories, even though yours is domestic violence and mine has been the loss of losing my son to gun suicide. But the journey of getting here, I was also a teen mother, so we know what that whole putting us in this statistical world of what we're going to be capable of doing back in the day, and I never considered myself a statistic. I just knew that even with me having my daughter so young, that I could still do so many things. And I was grateful that I too had some challenges with my ex-husband with abuse, but I was glad that I was able to move forward and and still even experiencing what I've had to experience with losing my son. The advocacy work has really moved me into, like you said, a space in my life that I never even fathomed would be possible.
Yeah.
Just like you said, I didn't wake up saying, "Oh, I just want to be a grief coach." You know, who
Yeah.
said that? You know, so yeah, kind of thrown into this work, but I love every bit of it, and it does, you know, our stories does definitely push us into our purpose. So I'm so grateful for your journey and that you have stayed the course.
Thank you. Thank you.
You did mention the Empowered Life podcast. Share a little bit about your listening community and share why you created that space.
Yeah, so Living the Empowered Life podcast, that was literally, I launched that last year and it had been on my heart for about 3 years. So, you know, we all have these fears, these insecurities. No matter how much we've accomplished, there's still going to be that little thing in the back of your head saying you're not good enough. But I knew that it needed to get out there. And so Living the Empowered Life podcast is really an opportunity for me to interview industry professionals. And when I say industry professionals, I mean women like us, right, that have stories. We've overcome something, and we want to share that information with other people to give them hope. So it's really about giving other women hope, because every person that I get an opportunity to interview, they have an amazing story, and I'm sure there's millions of people out there that can relate to that, and so it gives them hope. So at the end of the day, I just really did that so that I can have people like you come on and, you know, people who are definitely making a difference and walking in their purpose, no matter what the circumstances were. You know, they've overcome that adversity, and they can share that with other women to give them hope and let them know that everything's going to be okay. You're not in this by yourself.
Yes, and I truly appreciate my feature on your podcast. I really enjoyed it, and you have such a beautiful voice as well, to interviewing voice. I don't know if
Oh,
anybody's
thank
ever said
you.
that to you, but it's very calming and very, you know, I felt very at home and relaxed, and not pressured, because sometimes, you know, not even knowing the interview process, if there's an individual that hasn't been have showcased their story on a podcast, you just don't know what to expect. But I felt very at ease and very welcomed. I appreciate that opportunity of being able to share my story. What are some of your self-care practices? Because of all of the work that you do, what are some things that you can share with us
Yes.
that you do to support you with all this work that you have?
Yeah, self-care is important, especially self-care is important for anyone. But when you do the work that we do, you do advocacy work, it can be very emotionally draining. You pick up a lot of energy from people. And I remember there would be times where I'd just be sad for no reason. I'd be like, why am I sad? Like, I just feel sad. And my husband was like, well, you know, you just got done speaking to a group of domestic violence victims, or, you know, the group of women that you're coaching, you're taking on all that energy. So I had to learn how to really decompress and not take that on.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, having a daily spiritual practice really helps me, my prayer and meditation. And I do a daily devotional every morning. I call it, you know, having just coffee with me and God. That's when I have my cup of coffee. I have my devotional and my journal,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I'm writing. And that's my quiet time. So I have to do that every morning. That's how I start my day.
Mm-hmm.
And really being strategic about putting that on my calendar, because it's easy for me to be like, you know what, I don't have an appointment until 11, I'm gonna just lay here. But really forcing myself to get up and to get into that practice. The other thing, during quarantine, I started doing yoga. So sometimes even when I'm stretching or, you know, doing yoga, that's when I get to do my meditation. I can just sit in silence. So yoga is really good. Another self-care thing, to me, it's self-care. So sometimes we keeping track of your accomplishments, right? So sometimes we're hard on ourselves. So for me, keeping track of my accomplishments, that's self-care for me, because I'm like, okay, you know, it's okay to toot your own horn sometimes, and keeping track of those things that you've been able to do, because there's been times, like, the work we do is exhausting. And there's been times where I'm like, do I even want to do this? Like, I'm tired. I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I'm going to shut the foundation down because I'm exhausted. But then when I have conversations like this with you and I get to think about the accomplishments and everything we've done, I'm like, you know what? I got to keep going. I'm not going to give up. So that's what, tracking your accomplishments, that's what that can do for you. Being in a place of gratitude. I like to write. So, and I have my clients and do this too, but I have a gratitude journal. And so I do two things. At the end of every night, I write down, 3 things that I'm grateful for that happened in that day for myself. And then my husband and I do the same thing. We have a conversation at the end of the night, like, what am I grateful for? Or we'll call it like 3 blessings. What are 3 things, that blessed our relationship today, or that we're grateful for? And that really helps.
Wow.
2 more things: unplugging from social media, because social media is very busy. And you could find yourself scrolling and being depressed, looking at all the stuff on the news. Like when we were dealing with COVID, I did not watch the news. I rarely got on social media, and people would be like, "Oh, did you see the COVID numbers?" I didn't, because I'm not watching TV. I'm not watching the news. And I took all my notifications off my phone. And if it's an emergency, y'all gonna text me and tell me, because you're texting me now like, did you see that? So protecting my peace, that's what I'm gonna call it, protecting my peace, and learning to say no.
Yes.
Unapologetically.
Yes.
Because I'm a people pleaser. I used to be recovering people pleaser. I like nobody to be mad at me. So anything they ask me to do, I'm gonna just do it.
Yeah.
But
yeah, creating those boundaries are very important. Trust me, I do understand, and I truly appreciate you adding in that about keeping up with all of your accomplishments. Just like if I have a self-care plan, and I'm constantly telling people, create a self-care plan, create this kind of plan, but we do need to be reminded of what all we've done, because like you talked about that. Holding in that energy, which is called compassion fatigue, because we are overwhelmed with.
Write that down.
Yeah, we're holding it onto everybody's energy, because just like you said, you and your husband saying, he can point it out to you. You just did this. You're not thinking about that, but you just did this, and you just did this. You just did that. You just spoke to a girlfriend on the phone, or someone. People love to bring their problems to people like you and I, and we love to be a reciprocator of that, not realizing that we really are holding on to it. So that part of I'm gonna put that into my plan as well now, is the reminder of who I am.
Yeah. Miami, there was something I just thought about too that you reminded me of, and I shared this. You talked about the self-care plan, but didn't you talk about the little sticky notes?
Yeah.
I knew. Okay. I was like, I've interviewed quite a few people, but that stuck out to me, having the little sticky notes.
That's what's right here.
They're
everywhere. They're in my bedroom. There's one in my spiritual space. There's one in my car, or I keep it on my phone, next to my bed, because when we're having these feelings of the self-limiting beliefs, when they start to stir up in us, because we're not healed from that, they're still going to come around, but to negate that would be, of course, us saying some affirmations, or like you said, it's showing the things that we have done, the accomplishments that we have done. So I truly believe if I have that in my view, or if I readily available for me to go back and say, what, like you said, I don't really feel like doing this today. It's not like every time I get ready to do a podcast, I'm like, ooh, yeah, I got a podcast today. Like this morning, I woke up with this excruciating back pain, and I'm like, but I got a podcast at 3:00, but I got to do what I got to do. But yet still, even in that, the reminders, and thank you for sharing that. And I hope that really helps someone else too, to do that, because a part of the gun violence prevention movement, and I'm going to move on from this in a second, we often have to submit, the stories that we share, and that's an accomplishment. So I'm saying that to say also, because I know a lot of my viewers are from the gun violence prevention movement, keeping up with those speaking engagements and keeping up with, where we're sharing our stories is an accomplishment. So, and it'll also help us because we have to do so many within a year. But outside of that, that's to also show me, this is the work that I'm committing my life to. Because at the end of the year, like my final podcast for this year was on review of 2020. And with me being able to keep up with all my engagements, because of those forms that we have to submit, I was like, this is an easier process than me having to go back through the whole year. So thank you for sharing about the list to create about the accomplishments. And everything else that you shared, all of the self-care things that I didn't even think about. Yeah, that is a self-care practice. So thank you for sharing that. What's next for your journey?
Ooh, girl. I think that's a good question. So, everybody's like, what's your New Year's resolution? What are the goals for 2021? Everybody wants to do something new. I am really at a place where I just want to, and I don't want to use the word perfect, but to elevate what I'm already doing. I love the Living the Empowered Life brand. I love what we're doing with the nonprofit. I'm not certain that I want to add anything else onto that, except to just elevate it and take it to another level. And I like to operate in a flow, per se. I try not to overthink stuff. So if something comes to me, while I'm doing a power walk, then that's great, an idea. But this year, I really didn't sit down and write out a lot of goals for the business. Well, you know what? Well, for me personally, I did, because I think last year and the past few years, my focus has been on other people, on the business, the people pleasing. So a personal goal I do have for myself is to take better care of Tamiko and do more things for me, because I don't do a lot of stuff for myself. So personally, that's that. But for the brand, just kind of seeing if I could take it to another level. I love affirmations and quotes. So we have the Living the Empowered Life t-shirts. And so one of the things I did think about is having adding an affirmation brand of t-shirts to that. So if I do anything, it would be that.
Yeah, that is so cute. I love that idea. And I wish you well on that, and many blessings and abundance that comes with that. So that's a beautiful idea. I did want to ask you, because you did speak a little bit about COVID and the pandemic. I always like to ask this question because what did you find out about yourself during that time of the pandemic and everything shutting down, and now you have to position yourself in the business and the nonprofit and the brand itself? What did you find out about yourself during that time, or now, if you look back?
I found out that, and so this is not going to be nothing deep or nothing like that, right?
It has to be.
For me, it's like, I like action movies. Didn't really realize I like action movies, and I like movies like Narcos, and they're fighting, and because I feel like I had never really had an opportunity to sit down and binge watch TV. So through COVID gave me the opportunity to just sit down, watch TV. Because when people would be like, what type of movies you like? I'm like, I don't know. Now I know. I like action-packed movies with fighting and shooting and people jumping off of buildings. Like, love that type of stuff. So I learned that about myself. But I also learned that I could be creative. So having to come up with, what did we say we did this year? A lot of people say they had to pivot or kind of rearrange the way you do business. So kind of being creative and coming up with other ways to bring in income, to serve, our domestic violence community. So really being able to tap into those creative juices.
Yeah.
Ooh, one more thing. I started a garden while we were doing COVID. So I like outdoors. So I started a garden, grew some tomatoes. The watermelon started to grow, but then it got cold, so it died off. So hopefully it'll come back in the spring. But I have all my little, I have like my sage, my mint. So all my little seasonings. Like, I never thought that I would be that type of person. I grew up north. upstate New York, Buffalo, New York City girl. So now,
Wow.
garden. I have a little green thumb.
Well, you go, girl. See, I think, a lot of time we talk about how this whole transition of being of 2020 and being a part of the pandemic, because we all have been a part of it, and making it through, and it's still happening, but there were some great things that developed, I think, and it slowed us down, like you said, and now we had time and space to think about some of the things that we couldn't even imagine, but I'm so grateful for that time. But I forgot one thing that I did also want to mention, since we're going back to the pandemic and COVID. That time, the rise of domestic abuse was happening, um, because of that sheltered in order. Do you have any views about that, or what was happening that maybe you got wind of or learned during that time?
I mean, the only thing that I can say is, having compassion, because at the end of the day, you got to think people were sheltered in with their abusers. And you couldn't go anywhere because the shelters were closed. They couldn't let people in. We didn't know when COVID first happened, it was a panic. Like, we thought that, the shelters were closed. You can't come in. It's almost like a movie. Like, nope, we're not letting nobody in, so you're in this relationship, you're sheltered in with your abuser. They're frustrated because they're stuck in the house. So you have all these emotions, and then people can't go to work. So what I realized is that a lot of domestic violence victims, their outlet was going to work.
Yeah.
Going to the gym after work. I'm going to work, then I'm gonna go to the gym, or I'm going to go to the grocery store or do some errands. Then I'll go home because I don't have to deal with this person for a very long time. But now you can't go to work. You're stuck. You're sheltered in, and it's a sad place to be in.
Yeah.
Abusers are drinking more. Right, they're frustrated, and so one of the things that we tried to come up with was a self-care plan for those who were sheltered in place with their abusers, and just coming up with things that you can do. Do something. What feels good to you? Do you knit? Can you go sit outside? Can you start a garden? What can you do to occupy your time? What are his or her? I'm not going to just say his, but what are their triggers? Like, what are those things that will trigger that person? Can you kind of just make sure that you're not triggering? I know that's like, well, it's probably, some people are probably thinking like, well, why would she say that? If it triggers them, that's not her fault. But when you're sheltered in place, you want to make sure you know those triggers, right? So you don't push those buttons.
Yeah.
And just coming up with different things you can do for self-care. What virtual communities can you be a part of? It's a sad place. I just couldn't imagine, because I knew what it was like being in one of those relationships. I couldn't imagine being sheltered in place with somebody that's always taunting me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate us going back to that, because I think it's imperative for us to know, even like you said, knowing what someone's triggers are, so that I can stay safe. The at the end of the day, it's about me being safe. So it is important not to trigger someone's, not to bring up some things that may trigger the abuser. So yes, that's important to know. And I also noticed too, while you were sharing that, you were able to share like, when we were put in this position and I learned about what was happening to the victims, I created something to support them. And that's just what you do. That's who you are. And thank you. And that's what my podcast is about. I want to share all of the goods about Tamiko, and share, what you're doing. And if it's anything that you would ever like to partner on, if you want me to help you promote, I am here as a resource to you, because that's another thing that I love to do. I love to promote and beautiful people like yourself and your mission. And if there are other books coming about, just let me know. We'll put it on our sites. We'll share. I'll have my gun violence prevention movement to also share. We just want to get the word out too. And if everything that you're doing, that's just, I know, another gift that God gave me to help promote everybody's brand, because just, there's so much out here that we are dealing with. And I just want everybody that I know that I bring on are resourceful in supporting others. So thank you, thank you, thank you. The last thing is for you to share a personal quote with my Grief Nation listeners and why that's your personal quote.
Okay. So this is a quote that I probably came up with a few years. It was even before I had Living the Empowered Life, but it's a quote about empowerment. So empowerment comes from within and can be achieved by honoring yourself, your values, and expressing your talents and gifts. And what that means is that, empowerment is an inside job. Yes, we can look good and empowered from the outside, but what's happening on the inside? Are you really honoring yourself? Are you honoring your values? Sometimes we don't know what we value or what our values are, right? So honoring yourself, honoring your values and understanding what those are, because I believe when you know your values, you won't end up in these weird other situations because you know what your value and you stick to that. And so if something is not in alignment with it, I don't need to even go in that direction because it doesn't align with who I am. So honoring your values, expressing your talents and your gifts. And what that means is what we're doing right now, we're expressing our talents and our God-given gifts. We're expressing them and we're using them to make a difference in the world. So that's what that quote really means.
Wow, that is so beautiful. So how can my Grief Nation listeners reach you, or if someone wants to be a part of the Empowered Life, how can they reach you?
So I have the same social media handle all across the board at Tamiko Lowry Pugh. And my website is TamikoLowryPugh.com. So everything is there.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. And before I let you go, what's your superpower?
So I think someone asked me this before. If I just had to say one word, and I feel like I use that word so much, but it's who I am. My superpower is empowering other women.
Absolutely.
Empowering other women to honor themselves and their values and their talents and gifts. Absolutely. I believe that's what it is.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that so much. Before I let you go, what is your call to action? And is there something that we possibly haven't discussed that you would like to see change or bring further awareness to?
So I think we've definitely touched on a lot of stuff. I loved having this conversation with you. I love how it was just a flow, like a conversation. And I think we talked about a whole lot of stuff. But the only thing I want to say in closing, to those who are listening, don't be afraid to say yes to an opportunity that could potentially change your life. And I say that because sometimes we have a fear to move forward in life, and there's these opportunities that are presented, and we're so afraid to say yes. So at the end of the day, just say yes. Here's something my mentor, I heard her say a couple of weeks ago. She said, what you doubt, you delay, right? What you doubt, what you delay. And so if we are not saying yes to that opportunity that could potentially change our life because we're doubting it, then we're delaying our purpose. We're delaying that breakthrough. We're delaying whatever that thing is, right, that we're supposed to walk into, that success or whatever it may be. So don't be afraid to say yes to an opportunity that could change your life.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much, Tamiko Lowry Pugh, for joining It's the Miami Night Show Grief Talk. I truly appreciate your time today. And thank you for sharing so much valuable information to support others that are in the need of just being empowered and moving forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
You're welcome.
Well, there you have it, Grief Nation listeners. And thank you for tuning into another transformative segment on It's the Miami Night Show Grief Talk. Today, we give thanks filled with love and gratitude for our special guest, Tamiko Lowry Pugh, for expressing your very unique grief journey and sharing ways of understanding the healing process. This is your girl, Miami Night, with much love and light until we connect again spiritually. Bye-bye.
Slow-mo. He's got me walking that grief one. Going slow-mo. He's got me talking that grief tongue. Going slow-mo. He's got me clocking the way.
It's the Miami Night Show.
Hey, yeah. Slow-mo. He's got me walking that grief one.
up? It's Miami Night, your master grief coach. Welcome to the Miami Night Show. You got me walking that grief walk. It's time for grief talk, y'all.
I talk about things you think about.
It's Miami Night, your master grief coach.